Now we go. Dark Souls starts before Dark Souls starts. And I think that that is one of the most important things that anyone can understand about this universe. There are so many time periods and places and things that we never get to see that clearly exist in the universe. And so one of those we get a small glimpse of in the introduction of Dark Souls 1. It's called the Age of the Ancients. And we bring this up because if you ignore this stuff, you don't understand the conflict that happens later. You don't understand who the key players are. You don't understand the things that motivate them and the fears that they have. Because Dark Souls is all about the intentions of the key players. It is not about your player character, for the most part. It's about how your player character responds to the events of history. And so, the Age of Ancients. Before time began, which is a deceptive phrase that we all use in this universe, because there are events, which means there is time. So a better way to say it is before the Age of Fire, before things changed regularly. The world was gray. Endless trees, fog, water as far as you could see, and dragons. Dragons ruling and reigning. And if there's anything we know about dragons in the Souls lore, they're vicious and they're intelligent. They're not beastly. They have a sense of intelligence and thought. And so, in the Age of Grey, the dragons ruled. Who did they rule over? Weak creatures. In the Souls universe, souls equal power. It would seem for all creatures that we encounter except for dragons. Dragons have this natural strength, this natural power. They are undying. And that's why we look at this as saying before time began, because in this time period, nothing lived or died. Things just were. And so the dragons are called undying. Until one day, a flame was found. The unique thing in Dark Souls is there is an event that we are supposed to embrace without understanding. Out of nowhere, in this Age of Grey, this Age of Ancients, something happens, which is similar to the way that we look at our universe. Everything was the same, and then something takes place. And we just have to accept it. In Dark Souls, when something takes place, it's flame, it's fire. The introduction of Dark Souls 1 says, a flame was found. But who found it? And what did it do? Well, when the flame was found, it began this cascade of effects. This cascade of effects shows, as the flame came into being and as it showed contrast in the universe, things have to change. Before, when there was no light, there was no dark. When there was no life, there was no death. And that is what took place. The beings of this universe found powerful souls. Nito, the first of the dead. Before Nito, nothing died in this universe. They just were, and they were powerless. The Witches of Izalith, Mother Izalith, finds a soul, and unlike Nito, who held it to himself and did not distribute it, she distributed it to her daughters. Souls equal power, and so, where Nito is powerful, but separate when we run into him, hiding, the Witch of Izalith has distributed her soul and is weaker. Gwyn finds the soul and holds onto it himself. He holds this soul, later using it as a bargaining chip. You're later using it as a bargaining chip. And then, we find the Pygmy, the single most important character in Dark Souls, and the one we knew very little about, the Furtive Pygmy. Unlike Nito, who held his soul, and the witches who gave their soul to each other, and Gwen, who holds his soul, the Pygmy distributes his soul to his peers, who later we learn are the Pygmy Lords. And these original groups of Pygmies hold a more powerful, concise piece of the soul, but we later learn that the soul is continued to be distributed amongst all of Pygmy kind, later known as the Undead, later known as men. Once these souls give power, war begins. Led by Gwen and Nito and the witches, and even though it is not mentioned until later, the Pygmies. Those who exist in this world who have been held down by the oppressive reign of the Undying Dragons, who are betrayed by their own kind, they go to war. The Knights of Gwen, the Witches of Izalith, the Dead, and even the Ringed Knights, who we'd know nothing about until Dark Souls 3. Everyone went to war against the dragons. And as the dragons are defeated, life begins to change. Against such powerful creatures, you can do nothing. But as they become destroyed, as they become extinct, the Age of Fire begins. The first Age of Fire. And that is the background before Dark Souls.